Good evening, friends and family, and thank you for coming to another night with Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities Behind Black Business. And we bring to you tonight another very special guest, Andre Barnes. And Andre is HBCU Engagement Director of Numbers USA. And some of you are familiar with Numbers USA and others are not. But you are going to find out about Numbers USA tonight and what they're all about. Um, Andre, I want to thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. So, Numbers USA is a single subject organization. We have an advocacy arm where we will go to Congress through our members and encourage them to take on more sensible immigration policies. And we have the education arm, which I'm the head of. We'll actually go to historically black colleges, we'll go to community events and grassroots organizations and talk to them about the history of organization and where we are now, where we've been, and where we could go if we reduced or increased immigration numbers.
Okay. And so now, Numbers USA was founded solely in 1966 by Roy Beck.
19.
And Numbers USA is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that believes better immigration policy is possible and needed.
Yes.
Numbers USA is focused solely on immigration reform.
Yes.
And yeah, and so, today immigration is a big conversation. It was a big conversation at the debate tonight. It's having a lot of impact on our daily lives here in places like Chicago. And so it's become a bigger and bigger conversation. And especially since our president opened up our borders and let many people in. So it's really a major issue. So I would like for you to tell us how you got involved with dealing with immigration in the first place.
Yes. Well, it actually started inadvertently in Southwest Virginia between 1999 and 2003. It was during that time that I lived in a place called Halifax, Virginia, Southwest Virginia, and we didn't have a McDonald's nearby, so I worked on a farm, and I worked probably on the same farm that my great grandfather, who was a sharecropper, and my great great grandfather, who was a slave. So we did the same work: pulling tobacco, growing tobacco, harvesting tobacco, planting it, and doing odd jobs on the farm. Now I got paid. My grandfather got paid, but my great great grandfather did not get paid. So um, it was during that period between 1999 and 2003 that I noticed something. As I got closer to graduating from high school, I saw that less black people were in the fields pulling tobacco and that we had been replaced by Hispanic workers. Now, at the time that I was seeing that as a teenager, I didn't notice it. But it was later on, after getting my African American Studies degree, getting into the workforce, and eventually learning some of these things through Numbers USA, that I found that I had seen firsthand what employment displacement looks like in my little town in Southwest Virginia. So what Numbers USA was looking for, they were looking for an HBCU Engagement Director because they wanted to engage Black Americans on this little known history about mass immigration, and leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, A. Philip Randolph, and others were for restriction. But that's not where we are today.
No,
Um,
it's not.
and like you said earlier, we have the open borders. And I just want to give you a quote because a lot of people, when I say that, these leaders were talking about reducing immigration, not a lot of people know what that means. So W.E.B. Du Bois said the stopping of the importing of cheap white labor on any terms has been the economic salvation of Black American labor. And no one understood that more than A. Philip
Mhm.
Randolph. Because one thing that
Mhm.
he prophesied during the time that he was working with the Porters Union and um, and working on organizing Black Americans to get into unions, he noticed the link between economic prosperity, which is jobs, and
Mhm.
our voting power. So what
Absolutely.
this book, the Emancipation Reclamation, goes over is
Okay.
that history during the time period between 1924 and 1965, when Black Americans saw the greatest economic um, increase of our history.
Now
It was
that's something I would really like you to hone in on right
yep,
here
hmm
is the history
yep,
of that, which is what I found so fascinating about the reading that I did. I did not know about that Johnson Reed Immigration Act.
right,
And I'd like for you to give some history here on what actually happened during that
yes,
period. And this was like around this was in the 1920s,
yeah,
right?
in the 1920s. But
1920s. So
before
we're talking over 100 years ago.
that's it's the 100-year anniversary. It just
Mm-hmm.
passed. Yep. So we're in the year of the of the Johnson Reed Immigration Act. But before I go into that, one thing I
Mm-hmm.
would like to kind of give people is the precursor to that. So what was
Okay.
happening before? We were
Okay.
seeing a lot of immigration from European countries. They were coming in by the hundreds of thousands every year. Okay, so what was happening is we had the Emancipation Proclamation in 1860. All right, so newly freed slaves were trying to take jobs in the North, but for a period of time they couldn't go up there. And why couldn't they go up there? Because they couldn't get jobs. They were being filled by the immigrants, the white immigrants that were coming in by the boatloads, figuratively and literally coming in by the boatloads. So in 1915, from 1915 to 1919, the gates opened up for Black Americans. And you would see crowded train stations because what was happening, it was during World War I, where the boatloads of immigrants had ceased for a 5-year period and long enough for northern factories to need to solely rely on Black Americans. So what did they do? They went down south and they recruited Black Americans. They actually went to rural farms in the South with train tickets. They even went down south, posed as insurance agents, because if they were found out by like the Southerners that they were trying to, recruit the Black Americans, they didn't want that because they wanted them to continue to work on the farms. But
Mm-hmm.
they went there recruiting them. So what ended up happening was basically the kickoff to the Great Migration. Now, in
Okay.
the Emancipation Reclamation, the argument is, does the Great Migration happen if jobs weren't available to Black Americans to move north? This is something that
Right.
we talk about in the book. But going back to the 1924 Immigration Act, it was the first immigration act that did not have a time limit attached to it. There was another act in 23 that Black Americans were able to get jobs. Anytime mass immigration decreased even a little bit, it was enough for Black Americans to get their foot in the door to some of these jobs that were made available because there wasn't as much competition. So in 1924, Calvin Coolidge signed the 1924 Immigration Act. So what this act did, it took in 1 year, it dropped immigration from 700,000 to 294,000 in 1 year. And for 40 years after that, it was on average less than 200,000 per year. And it was during that time period, this what we're calling the Emancipation Reclamation, it was during this time period that you had 75% of Black families going into the middle class. You
Right.
had you also had a increase of real earned income salaries. Black incomes were increasing fourfold, while white incomes was increasing twofold. So it was affecting white Americans too, because they were able to
Hmm.
get some of these jobs as well. So what you're seeing is this period of 40 years of economic empowerment. And then what we find in 1965, they had the Hart-Celler Immigration Act. And what this act wanted to address was some of the race quotas that were in the 1924 Immigration Act. But what it did do, it did get rid of the quotas, but it allowed the numbers to increase exponentially. So
Hmm.
what we've seen is in 1924 they got the who wrong and the number right, and then 1965 they got the number right, they got the who right and the amount or the number wrong. So what we need to do is take the best of both worlds of this bill, of these two bills, to create an immigration policy that makes sense.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I want to do some comparisons now
Yep.
between then and now.
Yep.
And we had Black leadership understood this, even Martin Luther King,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And what's in there? Barbara Jordan.
Yep.
These people, they understood this. And so you had a large support from Black leadership, from the Black newspapers,
Yes.
our Black authors, even the artists. I read in your article, about the artwork
Yep.
that was
Yes.
all done about around the Great Migration. And so, why do we have such a different paradigm going on now with our Black leadership and immigration?
Well, one of the things that we've seen that the Democratic Party says is very different than the Democratic Party in the 1800s that they call like the Dixiecrats. That is mostly true. The only thing that hasn't changed is their dependence on immigrants. One of the ways that the Dixiecrat Party, what the Democrat Party at that time, was able to gain power was because it became unfavorable to the country to have the Union Army protecting Black Americans in the South. Okay, so the Republican or the Union Army, they lost 8 or 9 states that they had won the previous year. So they were saying to themselves, if we don't pull out, we're going to get voted out. So they pulled out in 1876. But what was the driving factor that really pushed the Democrats forward was their um, was the immigrants, the new immigrants joining the Democrat Party. So, they had a lot of different motivations to do so, but this is the connection, that the
Hmm.
historical connection of why the Democrats are always so tied to immigrants. So I wanted to preference that there. Another thing that we've seen is we've allowed lobbyists to gain a lot of power and influence over our elected officials. Money talks. And these lobbyist organizations, they're coming with a lot of money and support for these congressional members, and all they're doing all day long is pushing them on policies that fit their bill. And I'm going to give you an example of that. So, do you remember in Baltimore, there was a barge cargo ship that hit the bridge and it collapsed? All right. So,
Okay.
because of my line of work, the first thing that came to mind is, are they going to allow Black Americans to do some of this work? Because there's going to be a lot of jobs. Initially, it's going to be really expensive because it's going to be dirty, it's going to be dangerous, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people that maybe were unemployed before the bridge fell down to have an opportunity to get some money and to get back in the workforce. But not even one day after the bridge collapsed and four or six immigrant illegal immigrant construction workers died on that bridge, the very next day, there was an immigration lobbyist that went to the Biden administration and said, you need to provide us with more work permits so we can hire more immigrants to build this bridge back as soon as possible. Now, do you know that it was well received by the Biden administration? They didn't say yay or nay, but it was well received. So, what did Numbers USA do? We sent a letter to the Biden administration as well and said Black Americans need to be building this bridge. 60% of the population in Baltimore is Black, and there's a high unemployment rate, higher than the national average. And this could have been an opportunity to really mobilize some of these people that have been maybe looking for work or out of work for a long time to get on and start making a living off of building this bridge, or taking on some of the service industry jobs that would be related to servicing the people that worked on the bridge. So I had an opportunity to um, to to work with Numbers USA to craft that letter, and we also did a space about some of the to let people know that they should support this as well, because we thought it'd just be a great economic boost for people in Baltimore.
Okay. Okay. So so during this great migration, and black people came, and black people were making more money, white people were making even more money,
Yep.
and this is when this middle class actually began to form.
Yep.
And is this when the unions began to come about as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And during this same period, between 1924 and 1965, union participation went from single digits to around 70% in 1980. So you see this increase in unions. And what happens when you get people to organize in unions? Part of our success in the civil rights movement was due to the relationships that we build with other organizations through unions. So this is what A. Philip Randolph knew so well. He said there was I think it was Booker T. Washington that said any people that has economic power will not be downtrodden for long. That is a paraphrase, but that is ultimately what he was saying. And if we have economic power, we're going to be considered as a desirable voter group that's going to have power. So
That's right.
what's happening now is we have a high population of Black Americans that are unemployed. Now, nationally, 4.9% to 6%, whatever the number is it doesn't seem that high. But when you're in like Chicago, it's up to 6%. And that's a lot of people to be unemployed. So when you have that situation where you have a high unemployment block, that also limits the voter power that they have. So a lot of times people are just like, well, why are these elected officials just not doing what, Chicagoans are asking them to do? It's because we don't have in Chicago, they don't have the voting power because of the lack of economic power. So one of the things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to increase the amount of jobs that Black Americans have, and we're going to have to vote on policies at the federal level and at the state level that limits the amount of mass immigration, because that creates competition for jobs, competition for housing, and all kinds of things. So,
And I know this is one of the reasons we started this organization, was to enhance the awareness and support of Black businesses, because we're looking at the circulation of dollars
yeah,
in the Black community. It's what it stays, a dollar stays in the Black community for 6 hours. And then you compare us to other ethnic groups. I think the Jewish community is 20 days. And then the Asian community is 30 days, you
wow,
know. I mean, it's just the disparity is so great. And I know when I graduated from college and I came back to Chicago, and I noticed that there was a large Korean, community here of businesses. All
yeah,
right. They didn't live in our community. They had businesses in our community.
yep,
And then the people from India, came here and set up businesses in our community. And they had a structure set up where everything was in-house. You hear the story of the person who came here and maybe got a little cheap hotel, and just them and their family worked that hotel, so they could raise enough money to get their ultimate dream business, which was a gas station.
right,
But they did it because they kept everything in house.
absolutely,
And so this happened in mass in the Black community. At least I can say this is what I saw here in Chicago.
yep,
And people had these businesses in our community, but they gave nothing back.
and
And you couldn't do, and I say this every week. I start the show off, talking about this. Black people couldn't get employed
yep,
with them. You couldn't sell them anything. You
that's
couldn't
right,
bring your product into their store. They had everything was all in house. And
yep,
this was allowed, and you would think that the political representatives and the leaders in our communities would have said, well, it's okay for people to come here, but not to the extent where they're going to destabilize the economy that we have. And so
absolutely,
with the Black community going through decades and decades and decades of being under resourced, and then when you talk about Black businesses, when you look at the percentages here in Chicago, I think when it comes to employer-owned businesses, we're like 12%. And then you look at the immigrants, it's like 36% in and then there's certain industries we're pretty limited to: restaurants, maybe some boutiques, and arts and entertainment. And then these people have hotels, and they got gas stations, and they got construction companies. So the industry, there's an imbalance with the industry, there's an imbalance with the opportunity. And and I was just thinking, during the great migration, what it began to be like for Black people. And we know, because of all of the great communities that we built, like
right,
Bronzeville right here in
yep,
Chicago, and what happened in Harlem. So our communities flourished, our schools flourished. And I
yep,
was reading in your book even about the Black universities, the
yep,
HBCUs,
yep. It
and
came
our
up after
Martin Luther
all of the
King.
Great Migration. Yeah,
That's right. All came out of that entrepreneurship,
yep,
and even putting politicians into office.
yep,
And so this whole thing with lobbying, is what does a lobbyist actually do for some people? Because we've been talking about civics
Yep.
and needing more knowledge in civics, and a lot of people throw the word lobbyist around, but I don't think the average person actually knows what a lobbyist does.
I'm gonna give you guys a an actual definition, and then I'm going to then we're gonna talk about it. Give me 1 second. So a lobbyist is a person who takes part in an organization in an organized attempt to influence legislators. So a lot of times those people are connected to organizations, right? So
Mhm.
there's an immigration lobby, there's an environmental lobby, there's all kinds of lobbies, but they go and they do their darndest to start to influence legislators. What influences legislations? Money, their constituents. So if they can kind of pull the strings that way, that's how our elected officials are being influenced by these lobbyists. So it's a power play to influence them to vote a certain way. So this is what they've done, and it is something that has kind of tainted our politics because we know that a lot of times you hear it said that, oh, there's not enough people to work the jobs. Well, do you know that you've just heard the powerful plea of a business lobby? So businesses
Mhm.
don't want to restrict immigration at all because they get cheap labor, and because they're saving on the labor and not distributing it to the employees, they're getting these huge profits year after year after year. And it doesn't matter, if they have immigrants that have been in the country for a little while that have been working for them. The next wave of immigrants that come in that are cheaper, they'll use them just and they'll look the other way, even if someone's been loyal to them. So
Now,
go ahead.
Andre, what about these organizations that we have?
Hmm.
You know, we have the Urban League, we've got the NAACP, we have Operation Push, we have some major businesses, are they participating in the lobbying at all
Well,
on
you
our
have to
behalf?
you have to look at what
And
organizations
I'm not,
they're
and don't
lobbying
forget
for.
the excuse me, don't forget the sororities and the
Yep,
fraternities, as they
yep,
calling the Divine Nine
yep.
today.
Hmm.
Where are they in this?
Well, you have to look at who they're lobbying for, and a lot of those organizations are heavily Democrat organizations. They support Democrat organizations. So, um, immigration is not something that is now a Democrat policy. It used to be when Barbara Jordan and Bill Clinton were around. It used to be a policy that the the Democrats really pushed really hard for border security, and you would think that some of the things that Barbara Jordan said sounds worse than some of the things that Donald Trump says. About immigration policy and closing the border and who the who should have access to jobs in the United States. Like these were policies that they supported, but what has happened over time is it's switched. So this is why Numbers USA is a nonpartisan organization because
Mm-hmm.
all we're looking for is which party or elected official is going to support sensible immigration policies. And when we're talking about sensible immigration policies, what are the policies that are going to benefit Americans? Because we can be open to helping people in need, and the United States has done more than their part. Over a period of time, the United States has brought in 51 million immigrants to the country. The next highest country is Germany, and they've only brought in 17 million people into their country.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even close how generous the United States has already been. And another thing that I wanted to talk to you about
Are they
is
are they are they really being generous or
well, I think our policy is because the United States, in its beginning, has been open to immigrants. We have a soft spot for immigrants, and no one is saying that we should not have that we should completely stop the flow of immigrants into the country. But what we're seeing is that when we are opening up our borders and the numbers are very high, it can have an effect on certain parts of the population. So those are Black Americans, those are youth, because a lot of people don't even talk about the youth. We talk about the youth having issues with violence and drug use, but if they had jobs, they wouldn't have time to do some of those things. And
right?
if youth, they don't work by the time they're 26, they will probably not work for the rest of their lives. So it is important that we get young people involved in the workforce as soon as
At
possible.
an
And some
early
of these
age.
at an early age. And some of
Hmm.
these jobs that immigrants are filling could be jobs that teenagers could fill.
Right,
So
right.
when they're talking about like, having to pay Americans so much, well, teenagers, they don't really require that much money to start off. So like it just seems like there's a bias because the employers can pay immigrants less and then they don't have to be culturally involved with dealing with Black Americans who sometimes have a different culture than
Hmm.
some of the business owners are comfortable with. They don't want to make the effort. They don't want to hire anybody to make the effort. So
Hmm.
they've just decided that we've washed our hands of it, and we're just comfortable hiring immigrants. And
And see,
another thing,
it would be to our advantage to have more black businesses, because black businesses, even though they're small in number, 85% at least of the people that they're going to employ are going to be black people.
yep,
So it would make sense that we would have more businesses, but we got people blocking the black community from doing this. And I also wanted to comment on what you would make the comment that you made about America having a soft spot for letting everybody in. They do have certain countries that they have not been so receptive
that's
of.
right. That's absolutely
Haiti, and
right.
Haiti was one of them.
Yep,
They turned the Haitians around on
yep,
their boats and sent them back home.
they did. Yes, they did.
So
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 now,
it's a thing with black people. This is racism.
yep,
This is a systematic oppression of a people. This is
hmm
racism and white supremacy. You know, rather having immigrants come in and work than the black people that are already here. Just like when the people were on the plantations
yep,
and were able to eventually come here, they were skilled workers.
yes, they
You
were.
know, because they had been the ones that had been working on the plantations, and so they were very skilled workers. And now today, they're singing this mantra that our young people don't want to work,
Yep,
and
absolutely.
that kind of maybe covers, or addresses the comment that you made about having them beginning to work early. And as
Right,
we say, seeing black people own businesses,
right.
serving as mentors, and role models to see
Yes,
other people. Oh, I would like to maybe have my business one day, because of what you see. But we don't see a lot of our people in our community owning businesses.
absolutely. And I talked to like a reporter today, and one of the things that he said to me was, well, do you think it would be more advantageous to maybe not have Black Americans work construction jobs and jobs that immigrants fill because they're taking on higher jobs? And I said, absolutely not, because some of these jobs that you would consider lower are stepping stones into positions of employment. And some
Mhm.
you have to start somewhere and work your way up. So if we had those some access to some of these construction jobs, you would see that Black Americans would fill more of these roles. But what's been happening is over time, as they've been preferring Hispanic Americans and other, sorry, Hispanic immigrants and other immigrants, they've created what's like a cultural barrier. So if you're not a part of their social network, you're not getting in. If you can't speak Spanish, then you're not getting in. And just in the 1980s in Washington, D.C., there was a lot of Black construction workers. What happened? Did they all decide all at once, oh, I think I'm going to do plumbing? No. They brought in the immigrants for cheaper. They created social networks. They started doing most of their work in Spanish, and there was no place for us. So we moved on to other industries. Some people moved to other jobs. Some people moved into crime because if you can't make your ends meet, you'll find a way some way.
A lack of resources into our school system. You know, started Harold Washington, who was mayor of Chicago, once said, "Never let the mayor get into the school budgets, coffer," because back in the '90s, the mantra for the Chicago Public Schools was it was a cash cow, and there was always extra money left over at the end of the school year.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got in office and started cutting programs, they cut music, they cut art, they cut library. The
They closed
lunches,
schools.
the lunches got bad. Even the
Yeah,
food, we had cooks, and the lunches got bad. The children call them choke sandwiches. Most of them ended up in the garbage. Honestly, the fruit was not ripe. The drinks were frozen. I witnessed this.
yeah.
And then you have we had a good school system, we had a good curriculum, and that got sabotaged with different people coming in with contracts for how we're going to teach music. I mean, how we're going to teach math, how you're going to teach science, and kind of taking some of the control over the teachers and in terms of how they would work with their children. Because everybody doesn't learn the same.
That's right.
And then you get to the high schools, and as you talk about construction, cutting the construction programs, cutting the auto body and auto mechanic programs,
Mm-hmm.
cutting these programs out, and carpentry,
Or
so the
putting them
children
or
didn't get
putting
a
them in
chance to go
places
work
that
with
are
that.
not readily accessible by public transportation, because that was something that Brian Mullen said was a huge issue. A lot of those trade
Absolutely.
programs are in the suburbs. They're
That's
not
right.
in the city.
That's right. So they didn't get the access. It's all just totally under resourced. And there's so much that you can say about that because they were getting, while they were taking programs and cutting programs, there were other ways that more money was supposed to have been coming into the schools. Like we were supposed to get the lottery money that was supposed to happen. I don't know what was happening with that.
Yeah.
Children, the special needs children, they started to be able to bill Medicaid for their services. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure where that money went, because a lot of their money got cut as well. They put the teachers on extended pay. So they're taking money out of your check every twice a month so they can pay you throughout the year. Okay. and
Oh,
and somebody's collecting interest off of that money. That's a lot of money. You may have on the average $800 coming out of every teacher's check
yeah.
going into the bank. What happened to the interest? And so all this extra money coming in and money going out, and it appears as though resources were used to build up other parts of the city, like the
Right.
near north side, which you see now here in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So taking resources away, absolutely, you're going to have this criminal element, and and all of this mayhem going on in our communities. But
Absolutely.
getting back to immigration, and also with the immigrants, there was more money spent on their schools or building schools for them,
Yeah.
while Black schools were being closed.
Yep. That's right.
We had 50 schools closed here, you
Crazy.
know. and over 10,000 Black teachers, lost their jobs.
Yeah.
So, definitely there's an impact. And I think I was telling you earlier, I remember in Detroit, they tried to have an Africa Town, and it was the immigrants that pushed against it, and
Wow.
it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there is that issue. So, what policies in immigration do you feel need to be changed? Would you say Numbers USA or yourself personally feel what types of policies do you feel need to be changed?
Right. Well, I would recommend that people go to NumbersUSA.com and come to our action board because we can break it down to the federal and the local and the state level. So,
Mm-hmm.
one thing in the at the state level with your next door neighbor, Indiana, they had a bill that was to place a small tax on remittances. What is a remittance? Remittances are payments that immigrants or anybody can send to people abroad or within the country. So what we're finding is that immigrants are sending a lot of money abroad. So they're filling jobs in local neighborhoods, but they're not really putting money back into those communities. They're sending it abroad. So a housekeeper in Mexico makes the equivalent of maybe $5,600 a year. A housekeeper in the United States, they
Mm-hmm.
make anywhere between $13 to 17 an hour, which can equate to around 33,000 a year. So that person can send $5,600 to their relative. That's a year's salary. Okay, and if they send more, they're building a compound. They're building a great life for themselves, and eventually some of them will go back
We'll
to
go
Mexico
back.
and live the lifestyle. But
Mm-hmm.
where can Americans go? How can Americans
That's
send a
right.
year's salary to a family member so they could live like like a king? I would love to be able to send a year's salary to my family in another country, and then eventually, or just here, and just eventually just live a fulfilled and monetarily secure life. But that's not our reality. And as Doris said in her video, there's nowhere for us to go.
No.
Okay, we have nowhere to run to. Like it
Mm-hmm.
would have been great if during the um, the Jim Crow era that we could have gone to Canada and sent back
Mm-hmm.
money to people in the United States, and then
Mm-hmm.
sent so much money to the United States that we could come back later on when things that chilled out, and
That's
then
right.
live and set up our own compound,
That's
in somewhere in Florida somewhere, and have our own land and money and drink mai tais all day. But that's not we never had that option.
and the devastation and the suffering
Oh,
that
but
we
sorry, going
experience.
back to the tax. So
Okay.
what Indiana could do, they could do a tax, and from the tax that they did a similar program in Iowa, okay, and they got like $12 million. Where did that $12 million go? Right back into the community. So we're
Mm-hmm.
utilizing our taxpayer dollars to fund all these benefits for undocumented people,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not being taxed for sending remittances to their family members. That's ridiculous, and that should be taxed. And I think the people in Indiana should definitely push to get that passed.
Now, I have heard that many of them have businesses. They are allowed to have businesses here and
Yep.
pay no taxes.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So they get a leg up. And here's Denise, I was
And
talking to
our
somebody.
taxes are being increased.
Yeah, our taxes are being increased. And this is something that I talked to somebody earlier today about. So Denise, what's happening right now in like 5, maybe 10, maybe 7, maybe 2, people are gonna look at this situation. They're gonna look at how all these immigrants have started businesses. They've gotten law degrees. They've gone on to become teachers.
They've
They're
gotten
going to
into
look at
our
that.
political system.
Yeah, gained in our political system, become an elected official. They're going to look at them and they're going to look at us and they're going to say, well, why can't these black people pull themselves up by the bootstraps?
Yeah,
And they're going
thank
to
you.
forget about all those benefits that they
That's
received,
right.
all that tax-free remittances that they sent home. They're gonna look at the houses that they got for zero. They're gonna forget about the houses that they got for 0% interest. They're gonna
Interest.
forget about the 2 years that they didn't have to pay rent and they could save up to get a house. Like there was a report in Chicago that one of the first group of immigrants that came in, there was this couple that finally got a house, right? And everybody was celebrating it, but I was just like, well, you had all these benefits, you had all this time to save up all this money. You're probably giving down payment assistance or
That's right.
not having to put a down payment down at all. And we're celebrating you. Like, what about Black Americans? Why don't they put Black
Mm-hmm.
Americans in the house with the
That's
same
right.
benefits?
They're not even concerned about us.
Yep.
I have some people that I know, friends I consider, that are immigrants, and you try to have this conversation with them, and they're not even concerned.
No.
They're not even concerned, and they're sitting right in the black community, and they're making money off of black people. And you try to talk to them like we are we don't get into politics on this in this organization. We don't support any particular party or
Right.
anything like that.
Same here.
But I'm looking for issues to be put on the table. And
Right.
if you mention anything about the election at this juncture, it's if you have some issues about the Democratic Party, then you hate Donald Trump. You know, I mean, that's what you're accused of, and
Right.
that's where all of the focus is. And there's nothing about issues. People are asking us to vote, but nobody's putting any meat on the table.
That's right.
The whole conversation now is about immigration and a woman's right to choose,
Yeah.
for abortion rights. Those are your main issues. Nobody's concerned about Black people and all these things that you just mentioned. I'm
Yep.
just thinking of the devastation that in the Black community that has occurred and is occurring as a result of all of this.
Absolutely. And no one is going to look back at this situation and say, oh man, like we had this elected official make all these promises and then they didn't do anything. And now you have year after year after year that they continue to get elected. This is where Numbers USA can really fill a void because we hold elected officials accountable. We have grade cards. So if you forget how they voted 3 years ago on immigration, you
Mhm.
can look it up. You can see exactly what they voted for. You can see their grade. You can go down to the granular level and see how they voted or if they abstained or whatever. But we have to get pressure on elected officials if we're going to get any change. And we have to stop giving our votes away to people that don't have to elected officials that don't have our best interest in mind. So I would implore people that are watching this or who watch it later to join Numbers USA because the more of us join it, that creates a block of influence that we can have over some of these elected officials. And they'll see, hey, Numbers USA is all of a sudden getting a lot of Black members. They must really care about this immigration thing. And
Mhm.
other Black people are going to look at this and they'll be like, wait a minute, why are all these Black people joining Numbers USA? You know, then they'll get the history. I don't
That's
think
right.
we know enough about our own
That's
history
right.
and how mass immigration has affected us. We have a prescription for um, unemployment. We have a prescription for dealing with the wage gap between Black Americans and white Americans and other and immigrant Americans. There's a wage gap between Black Americans and Hispanic immigrants, and
Mhm.
they're making more than us over time.
That's
Okay,
right.
so there's a wealth gap. So we have a prescription for that, and we've seen time and time again. that anytime mass immigration has been reduced, that Black economic empowerment and voter empowerment has increased time and time again, example after example. And there were 4 committees that studied after they did the 1965 Immigration Act. There were 4 committees that studied that act, okay? And they all said the same thing. We need to reduce immigration. If we keep going with these numbers, um, it's going to really continue to hurt Black Americans. And look at us now. Look at where we are now. I hope that there is enough.
And look at us as a people.
Yep.
And I mentioned Bronzeville, I mentioned Harlem. There are other communities. Look at the wonderful contributions as a people that we
Yep.
have made, to this country, to this
Yep.
to this planet.
Yep.
As a people, as you said earlier, we have nowhere to go.
Right.
This is home for
Yep.
us. And within the midst of this, we have made so many contributions, but it's like everything is being ignored and it constantly want usury. I do want to ask you, what is your opinion on reparations?
Okay. Well,
What is
NumbersUSA is a single subject organization, and they don't have a position on reparations. But Andre, the person, can see the argument for reparations. Okay. But when I work with people on the reparations issue, a lot of times I have to make it clear that I can't come out to the forefront and say, hey, with my Numbers USA garb on and say, hey, look, we're all for reparations. No, but I can point to people that are in the reparations movement. Hey, this book has all the receipts to everything that you're talking about with reparations. Can we do an event that kind of brings attention to something that you're doing? Can I help you in other ways than being with you publicly, side by side,
Sure.
on this situation? I think we can work with each other collaboratively in different lanes. So a lot of times when you see me doing things for Numbers USA, I'm going to stay in my lane. But to answer your question, I
Sure.
do believe that there's a debt that needs to be paid. I just can't work exclusively in that field because I am in another field.
Okay. And I think the whole issue of immigration is kind of in the middle of that too, when I
Yes.
see how things are playing out, and especially with the within the political arena. And I was present when the United Nations came here to Chicago State, and people got up and talked about what was going on here in Chicago. And they determined that they felt, that it was due.
Mm-hmm.
It was due. But then again, you have people who are pushing back against it, and some of those people are immigrants.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes it really difficult. And that's why Mr. Brian Mullins is like spearheading creating a Freedmen's Bureau and getting like a protected class status for Black Americans,
That's
which I
right.
think needs to happen.
That's
We
right.
used to have some sort of distinction from Black people from other countries. We used to have like our own classification. We have our own specific history, and the the fact that they kind of lumped us all into one group really hurt us. So when they decided, I don't know what year it was, to make all Black people, whether they were from and whether they were from whether they were an American descendant of slavery or from anywhere else in the world, into one group, that really hurt Black American freedmen.
Absolutely, because anybody can come and claim to be Black,
Yeah,
but have a whole different ideology,
yeah,
have had a whole different experience, have a whole different agenda, you know, around that whole conversation.
absolutely.
And so, yeah, that's not fair. But I agree as well that we need to be a protected class. and we
Yeah.
need to be a protected class because of, it's like everybody else is an immigrant.
Yep.
When they asked Biden about reparations, his response was, immigrants built this country,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and
That's what they
and
say.
the immigrants are the ones that are allowed to flourish
Yep.
as a group.
Hmm.
You know, we can maybe do some things individually or, in small groups or in certain classes of people, depending on what organizations you belong to. But when we come together collectively as a group, you get the pushback. And I think it's just because people can't, continue to use us. And that's what
Right.
we need to be protected from, everybody else using Black people.
That's right. That's right. And I think that Denise, I think we're gonna get there. I think that it's going to take an effort of education. We're
Mhm.
seeing more people and spaces and social media in this election cycle really make a statement about these things. So it's going to take some time, but I do think that we're going to get there, and that there
Mhm.
is an opportunity for us to continue to educate each other and to build each other up.
Mhm. So how can people um, get involved with it? Before I say that, there's a
Mhm.
book.
Yep.
There's a book called Back of the Hiring Line,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
And that is also by Mr. Beck,
Yes, it is.
which I think it will be a wonderful read. And because we do a book giveaway
Yep.
every month
Yep.
because we feel like it's important. We're a small group out here, but we have big hearts and we
Yep.
have big concerns for our people and pushing and supporting the Black businesses, but also reading. We've been great proponents of our bookstores here in
Right.
Chicago. We used to have 22 Black bookstores here in
Oh.
Chicago, and we
Wow.
went down to two. You know,
Oh.
now there is a resurgence of bookstores. Some are online
Mhm.
and some are brick and mortar,
Yeah.
and I encourage our people just as much as I say support Black businesses, support our Black bookstores.
That's right.
Everybody, when the even when authors come on our show, where can we get your book? You know
Yep.
where they say Amazon, right? And I'm
Right.
like, we got some Black bookstores here that we can put these books in and
Right.
support our Black bookstores because, as we said earlier, they're more likely to give back, directly and indirectly to our
And
community. So
could
that's
you
why that's so
imagine them
important.
shouting out a black owned store instead of Amazon, instead of Barnes and Noble? Like
It has to become a consciousness. And
right.
that's why, reading and gaining knowledge is so important. A lot of our people, the way they teach civics in the schools, it's not for you to know how this government works and how you can, be a part of it and impact it. So,
Right.
and the politicians know it because all they
But
want you to do is come and
but
vote.
ask any immigrant that comes to the country. They
That's right.
know the Constitution and the laws backwards and forwards.
That is
They know
correct.
all the benefits that are available to them. So
That
we
is
need to take
correct.
advantage of educating ourselves about the benefits that we have for being Americans. And the last one of the last things I'm going to say, Denise, is I think we as a people we need to change the way that we think about mass immigration. Um, there have been many reversals from prominent people that have changed their mind about their thoughts about immigration. Sir Angus Deaton, he's an economist. For a long time, he did not think that mass immigration affected Black Americans. But after he kind of looked at the Great Migration, after he saw what happened in World War One, he
Hmm.
shifted his argument and said, I was wrong. I was wrong. I've changed my position. So there have been a lot of changes around mass immigration and how it affects the community, but we have to get the word out.
Okay. Well, we have our book of this month is Stolen Legacy.
Okay.
And our winner is Greg Cook. And this is a book on who are the true authors of Greek philosophy.
Mm.
And they were the people from North Africa, the
Yep.
Egyptians. And so that's what this book is about. And Greg Cook has won this book. And we
Congratulations,
send
Greg.
the book out. Greg, you'll receive a copy. This book was selected by Afriware Books. They are an online bookstore. Although they do take by appointment only if you actually want to meet with the proprietor in Zynga. That is possible, and that would be with Afriware Books Store.com, and the phone number is 708-223-8081. And congratulations to Greg. And we want you to continue to support all of our bookstores. We want you to continue to support our Black businesses. Look at it as an investment in yourself. And we also want you to support the Southside Community Federal Credit Union, which is a Black-owned financial institution here in Chicago. And they came about because of the discrimination that Black people were experiencing, putting their money in these major banks, trying to get loans from these major banks. They give financial literacy classes. They have all types of loan programs, and they're located at 55th and Wentworth. And in order for a bank to survive, we have to open up accounts. So we ask that people will open up accounts at the Southside Community Federal Credit Union.
Okay.
So we are at the top of the hour. Andre, this has been a very enlightening conversation. I hope it has stimulated some people to have a better, to get some more knowledge, and to get the book back of the hiring line.
Yep.
And also you said you have done some, you've made some adjustments to the book that you have now, right?
Yeah, so we have a new publication called the Emancipation Reclamation that looks at that time period between 1924 to 1965. It also looks at the construction and the Great Migration. So those are topics that it goes over. It's 43 pages. It's a very quick read. And Denise, I'm actually going to send you a electronic version because we just opened up the electronic version for the newer version that we have today. So since I'm going to send it to you, and if you send me Greg's email, I will send him one as well, since he's our big winner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if people want to get in touch with NumbersUSA or get involved and find out more about NumbersUSA, where would they go?
There's two places that they can go. They can go to NumbersUSA.com. That's easy. You can also email me at A, which is the letter A for my first name, which is Andre. My last name is Barnes, Barnes, at NumbersUSA.com. You can email me directly, or you can find me on Twitter, Andre NumbersUSA, at Andre NumbersUSA.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I like the work that you're doing, and I'm definitely looking to support you in what you're doing. And yeah, this is, it's all about working together, and it's all about knowledge and understanding what is going on. So, Andre, I want to thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you so much for having
family,
me.
I hope you got something out of this. I know we often say, oh, I enjoyed. I want you to enjoy, but I want you to get something out of it. And there's work that has to be done. And remember, support Black businesses. Good night.